class. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Talk Back. This is March 30th, 2021. Just reminded that it is the penultimate day of Women's History Month. Are we coming out of the darkness into the light from last year? Maybe we are. Maybe things are lightening up. But, we still have so many hot button issues to discuss. And so we brought back our political pundits from last year. The last time we spoke with them, it was after the election. Some of their predictions did not come true. Some of them did. And it was right before the Georgia election and before the January 6th insurrection. So let's take a look and test their pulses again about what's going on. And we have some fun ways to do it through the art of political cartoons. So first, let me introduce my guests for today, our pundits. We have from California, the beauty of StreamYard and Zoom, Greg Loudon. Hi, Greg.
Good morning from here.
Yes, you're 9 a.m. We're high noon here in Connecticut. And Shannon Loudon across the U.S. in Connecticut. Esquire, attorney Shannon Loudon. Good to see you today.
Good afternoon, Sheila.
Okay. And from Boston, Karen Melkonian. Hi, Karen. Hi.
Hi, everybody.
All right, so before we get to the political cartoons that we're going to do, remember the last time we spoke, it was right before the Georgia Senate election. Most of us were kind of pessimistic that they could pick up 2 seats, that the Democrats might split it. And I think we all were concerned about the Electoral College ceremony in the Capitol, but nothing like what happened. So I want to just go around quickly with each of you. Could you have imagined, one, the Georgia race, the 2 Democratic senators winning? And secondly, could you have imagined what actually happened on January 6th? Was that a surprise or expected? Let's start with you out in California, Greg.
Well, I think both of them were imagined or imaginable, but they were not things that I would have called probable or at all likely. One positively in the Georgia Senate races and the other negatively. I mean, we did have the example of what had happened in Michigan with militias storming their Capitol chamber, but you didn't think that could happen in Washington. I look forward to the investigation into it sort of fully explaining or at least giving us as much information as possible as to how things broke down that let that happen.
Okay. Shannon, how about you? Did you imagine that we knew the Trump phenomenon? We knew the gullible people who followed him. Did you expect it to realize itself in such a virulent, violent way? Shannon.
No, I never could have imagined that, Sheila. And having been in Washington, D.C. on Inauguration Day, the aftermath of that was so troubling. I was there on January 20th because I had wanted to be on the Mall to witness history in the inauguration of our first female vice president. And so I had a hotel reservation, went down. I had lived in Washington, D.C. for 5 years, and it was just disgusting to see our Capitol be a military zone. And there were 10-foot high fences with barbed wire around the top in a lot of places, but throughout the entire mall, you could not get anywhere near the mall. And it was really disheartening and disgusting. And hopefully I answered your question at length. I'm sorry, but no, I never could have imagined what occurred on January 6th occurring.
Right. And were you one of us who said that the Georgia Senate race would go Democratic, both of them?
I thought that I said both of them would go, but now in reflection, I think I wasn't that optimistic.
Yeah.
I wanted to take credit, but I thought only Warnock would win. I didn't believe both he and Ossoff would win.
Okay, great. Karen, let's have your take on those two issues.
No, I might be revising my recollection because, but I think I thought that we could win Georgia both races. I think I was being optimistic and thinking if I felt good, it would happen. But I might be wrong. You may have better documentation of that. And then as far as what happened at the Capitol, could I have thought in advance that that would happen? I guess I thought that there would be enough force not to let it happen. It didn't. I don't think that it struck me that that type of violence and those people would have appeared given all that preceded it. I think I was surprised that they were capable of getting in. And in retrospect, I'm not surprised that that level of violence or that those people were there, given all that preceded that in other capitals and the words that were being used.
Right. Well, my thinking was I knew that there probably would be protests by Trump people, but I thought they would be around the city of DC, but never imagined that it would get to the Capitol. I would have predicted some violence because there were clashes in previous weeks from some of those Proud Boys and some of those other groups, but not in the Capitol. And I agree with all of you. Let's hope that the investigations bring forth a lot of convictions, including people close to Trump and hopefully Trump himself, but we'll get to that. So now we've got a new administration as of January 20th. And how is Joe Biden doing? Let's start off by taking a look at some of the political cartoons I have on tap for you today. Can you see the screen, guys?
Yep.
Okay. So here's the first slide, kind of fun. Joe, this is going to take a lot of bleach, light, and paper towels. I'm going to go to the next slide so you just get a flavor and then have you each comment on this general issue. Next one. Aha. Biden hits the road to boost his recovery plan. American Rescue Plan, the biggest, big effing deal since FDR. Let's start with you, Greg. Do you think Biden has a chance to be an FDR? What do you think of how he started out so far?
Well, I hope he doesn't, because that would involve an even larger depression and a world war. And I don't really think we want those. Given that, I think how he started out has been very impressive. It is, a BFD that the American Rescue Plan is as thorough and broad and deep as it is. And I like the fact that he basically has said, I am willing to talk to you. I am willing to compromise on some things, but you are not going to get me to back off things that I think are important by just threatening to withhold bipartisanship.
Right. So, of course, when you said if we don't want the depression and the war, I think I was referring to the way that he changed the culture of legislation and changing the economics, labor, and business in all of the legislation that he put forth that has now become the foundation of our society, and that the Republicans have been trying to dismantle ever since. So that's what I was referring to, the kind of bold imaginings of legislation to help the economy. What about you, Shannon? What is your take?
I've just been very impressed and very proud of our administration. I really enjoyed his first press conference and his measured approach. There are a lot of different things that this administration has to address, and I feel comfortable that he has indicated that he has priorities and that he is checking off one priority at a time, and not, it would be lovely if he could tackle them all at the same time. And that's what a cabinet and that's what an administration is for. So I know that there are thousands of people working on all these other very important issues, but I love the prioritization. I think that shows that he has a plan. And that's something that's been sorely missing for 4 years. It's not just scattershot. And the American Rescue Plan, Vice President Harris was just up here with Rosa DeLauro, and congratulations to Congresswoman DeLauro, who finally got her child care tax credit that she's been vying for 18 years. That's why Vice President Harris came up here. Also, that they're doing the nationwide support and rallies for their American Rescue Plan. But that was a BFD, especially to get that through. And I think the other thing, as a very proud Democrat, that I want to say is we got it through with 0 Republican support. So Republicans, don't start to try to take credit for something you had nothing to do with. Right. You tried to turn us back at every question that came up, and we got it through and we got it done. And God bless Georgia for providing us with that opportunity to make an incredible difference in the American lives and American economy.
Right. Okay. We'll talk about the other potential issues in the agenda and how we might try to work those. Karen, what's your take?
Well, I actually feel safe. And, intellectually, whether, he's the new FDR, et cetera, I feel safe. I think the people that he has selected are qualified, thoughtful. I don't have cognitive dissonance. There, aside from the millions of things that were troublesome in the last, administration, one of the big ones was the always inconsistency, never know, throwing his own people under the bus. And, to feel safe, you need to know that your cabinet and your leader have respect, honor, and sync. And maybe there's a few things. To me, having heard over the last several months how this has been going, that is the most important thing to me. That, as Barack Obama said in the past, we need to not have a circular firing squad, and we're not. And I think that he's led better. I think he keeps his mouth shut. Even I'll say one thing that I found particularly impressive with Andrew Cuomo. Really, the only thing he said is we need to respect the folks who come forward, instead of back and forth and ping ponging. And he keeps his mouth shut when he needs to. I'm not saying he's perfect. All I'm saying is, so far, I feel safe in his hands. Safe because he's picked the right people. Safe because there's consistency. Safe because even if there's a misstep, I know that they're on it and I trust them. That's really all I could ask for.
Let's see. Let's move on. What do we have here? This is talking about the Republicans, and they're not supporting everything. Most Americans are preoccupied right now getting free stuff, but one congressman who's glad that your network, I'm assuming they mean Fox News, is focusing on some real issues like Dr. Seuss and Mr. Potato Head, why partisanship has become so overrated. So there's the comment about the Republicans seem to be more interested in driving the cultural issues, right, than in because they can't seem to get a foothold in doing anything about the economics. What do you think about that, Greg?
Well, I think it fits into the larger profile that Republicans don't have a plan. They don't have a strategy. They don't have, because their policy goals are not widely popular. It's hard to sell more tax cuts for rich people. That's a hard sell at this point. So if you can divert the conversation to those culture war issues, especially those minor culture war issues, and just keep manufacturing new ones, you can divert the public's attention, and I think that is, given that their strategy at this point seems to be win and not win for anything, not to win to do anything, just simply to win, that's the best strategy they have left.
Right. So I'm going to go on, and I'm going to, instead of having each of you comment on each one, I'm going to follow along and move on and have Shannon comment on the next one, because,
Hey.
you know, it relates. There you go.
I
The
talked about
GOP.
it and I forgot about this cartoon. Wonderful. Nice
All
segue.
right, well, so now you can relate this cartoon to what you were saying before. The GOP is screaming, socialist. That's not working, is it?
I certainly hope not. Of course, we've had 4 years of it, and unfortunately, almost half our voting populace bought into it. So I can't say that we've overcome that yet. Trump had an ongoing and lasting effect as far as his misinformation, disinformation, and out lies with regard to name calling and divisiveness. So again, I'll give kudos to Congresswoman DeLauro, wonderful champion for children. And she finally, you know, got her child tax credit through, courtesy of a $1.9 billion or trillion dollar American Rescue Plan. It's been a long time coming, and is critical to help our children. 1 in 5 of whom lives in dire poverty.
Yes, they say that 40-50% of American children will be taken out of poverty with these programs that are in the rescue bill. But keep in mind, Shannon, keep in mind that the bill, the child tax credit, is just for this annual year.
Yes.
It needs to be continued next year.
Well, and I've received a lot of requests to actually call my congressmen and senators to ask just that it not be a one-time thing, that we finally got it passed. And again, Sheila, I know we're going to get to it, and I don't mean to go on, but a critical thing that I know the Biden administration learned from the Obama administration, in which he was a part, is while you have got the majorities, you get as much done as possible.
Right. We'll get to that. Yes, absolutely. So it's a good advocacy point, Shannon. Get those letters and notes to your congressmen and senators to get that child tax credit renewed.
Make it permanent.
For permanent, right. Again, okay, Karen, look at this one. At least the insurrectionists didn't do anything heinous, like supporting a $15 per hour minimum wage or assisting state and local governments. In other words, those are the greatest sins for the Republicans. Comment on that, Karen.
Well, I mean, I will say that at least, you know, I mean, it's not even hyperbole. You know what I mean? It's like almost not a cartoon, because that is what they're saying, basically. Those people on the left, they're socialists. All they want to do, you know, is do this horrible thing and get $15 an hour minimum wage, making people think, you know, because they only listen to the words, they don't read, that's just a terrible thing. And the way they talk, and we know that people are easily brainwashed. So what do I think of that? I don't even think it's a cartoon. I mean, I think it's just is. And I was writing, you know, some notes. And one thing that we learned from Timothy Snyder in his book On Tyranny, when he was talking about how the stronghold takes effect. I mean, one thing is people don't read. So like in the previous one, it said socialist. Do people who are really opposed to socialism know what a socialist is? Do they look the definition up? So here, people would think, oh, that was bad. Oh, getting $15 an hour minimum wage is bad. Do they stop and think why? No, this is exactly, I think, it's not hyperbole. It's not even a cartoon. It's brainwashing, and it's what's happening.
I think from the Republican point of view, the term socialism means impressing your Republican underlings that socialism is getting free stuff for other people, not you. That's what it's about. Getting free stuff for you is good, but for everyone else, that's not good. That's the definition of their socialism. But we also, I think they needed to advertise a little more that the $15 per hour in the bill wasn't even going to get to $15 per hour now. It was going to be a gradual thing over a bunch of years. It was going to go up to 8 and then 10 and so forth. They couldn't even, do that much. Because of their rules.
Just real quickly to interrupt about the minimum wage, I was appalled when I found out, and I consider myself pretty informed. Is it now like $7.65?
$7.85. Yeah.
I was incredulous when I found that out. It's just unconscionable that that's where it is and has been. I think it hasn't moved in about 15 years. Is that
I think
correct?
it was 10, about 10 years ago when it was last, but that's the federal, and other states have put 15 in.
Right. In
So
Connecticut, we're taking care of it, and we're
Yeah.
doing it on a state by state basis. But
Right. It's a patchwork, and there is no question that different states are set in different economics kind of strata in terms of cost of living and income and so forth. But that's the Republican attitude. No free stuff except for me. Greg, I like this one because this is similar. Here they are. Democrats, let's think. We pushed a progressive stimulus package through while the right was preoccupied with Dr. Seuss. Tell them the Giving Tree, that's a fabulous children's book. The Giving Tree is a socialist, and we can pass a Voting Rights Act. What do you think, Greg? You think that can work? Let me go back to that one.
I think, like I said, it is, their focus on culture wars is not about outcomes. It's simply about keeping their base and keeping their base riled up. I don't, I think it's, we haven't talked about it yet, but I think the problem here is that, we still have the filibuster in place.
Yeah, we're getting to that. All right, Greg, I want you to take this next one because now we're getting into the COVID issue and where we are on that. We have an extra hour of daylight. Just one. It feels like much more. Are we coming into the light? Let's look at the next slide. We have a feeling of optimism, but I was watching our CDC director last night, Dr. Rochelle Walensky, and she's concerned that we are not coming out and that if we're not careful, these new variants will bring a spike in cases and we'll be going through a fourth wave. Again, Greg, comment on all of this. This last cartoon and this one, Biden, is it too early to spike the ball on Operation Warp Speed, the vaccines coming forward? And then finally, of course, I love this one, possible side effects. I just hugged my 2 granddaughters for the first time a couple of weeks ago. That felt really good. And now this one, COVID relief check came in handy. I need to get away from that never-ending pandemic. Greg, factor all of those into your comment.
Well, that's a lot to cover, but I mean, I think
do they have the daylight savings time in California?
Oh, of course they do.
Oh yeah, I'm just teasing.
I do think what I've been noticing is that there is as Karen mentioned, a more profound sense of optimism about things are at least heading in the right direction, or at least are understandable. At least make some form of sense in a larger way. The thing I'm concerned about is in what the CDC director said is that we have to deal with variants, and the larger the population that has not been vaccinated, the more variants will come, and therefore the opportunity for more virulent and more deadly variants will always exist until we get to essentially herd immunity. Now, the problem with that is that herd immunity is not a local phenomenon. It is worldwide at this point. One of the things that I study is Latin America, and the largest outbreak right now and the deadliest outbreak right now is in Brazil. And the problem there is that Brazil is a even more unequal country than the United States. It has a large population of people in poverty who will not get a vaccine for a long time, along with a very right-wing president who has spent his entire tenure denying that COVID is a problem.
He had it himself. He had it himself, didn't he?
Yes, he did. And but what he's used that as, it's sort of like what Trump did. His name is Jair Bolsonaro, and what he's done is said, "Oh, it's no more than the flu," ignoring the fact that, of course, as presidents of their countries, they had absolutely the best healthcare, absolutely the most cutting edge treatment, and therefore they did not have as severe a reaction as was possible. Actually, I think Trump's was probably slightly worse than Bolsonaro's.
Yep.
But the point you need to make is that every person who is unvaccinated is basically a petri dish for this virus to develop, to mutate, and to possibly become a stronger or more deadly variant. And so until we have enough of the world vaccinated, not just the United States and not just your town and not just your locality, but until we have enough of the world vaccinated, this thing is still out there and it's still going to be a problem. That being said, we are in a hugely better place in the United States than we were 90 days ago.
Right. Of course, President Biden came out yesterday with another plea for wearing masks because he had heard what the CDC director said. And I guess we can't have a nationwide law with criminal penalties if you don't wear your mask or practice social distancing or indoor gatherings. We have to rely on the goodwill of so many people in the states. And we have governors like the one in the spring break states who are not helping, and in many ways, I think, are happy in some ways to sabotage what Biden is trying to do. Shannon, let's take the next one along the same veins. No mask mandate in Texas, March Madness, and this one, yippee, cancel masks, Wichita, cancel restrictions. And here we have the variants. Congrats. Now lick me, big boy. Shannon, did you watch Dr. Birx in her interview with CNN, where she talked about how if proper leadership had existed while she was in the task force, hundreds of thousands of deaths from COVID could have been prevented?
Yes, and I also watched her emotional
all right,
response.
Talk about all of that with these slides.
Well,
yes.
So just to follow up and continue on the COVID and vaccinations and the pandemic and whatnot, I am hopeful, and I share Karen's hope and safety and feeling better, especially as of yesterday. I believe they came out and said that both Moderna and Pfizer have been now confirmed as being able to combat the variants that we are now aware of. But I'm married to a mucosal immunologist. So unfortunately, I know a little bit more about biology than I would have a long time ago. And two things, and that is that a virus is a living organism, and so it wants to preserve itself. So as Gregory has alluded to, the more we knock it out with vaccinations and immunizations, the more it's going to increase in virulence to try to stay alive. Second thing, just because we get vaccinated doesn't mean we're not carriers of the virus. So we need to be aware of that. Just because we hopefully ourselves can't get it doesn't mean we can't pass it along. So going to another thing that Gregory said, and that is we've got to get to herd immunity. My upset is in response to a number of people that I've come into contact with who are refusing to get the vaccine. They're not your typical anti-vaxxers. Many of them, unfortunately, are Republicans. I'm not saying unfortunately because they're Republicans, just that unfortunately they seem to fall along that ilk of refusing to get vaccinated. We can't get rid of this pandemic until we get rid of the disease. And the only way we can do that is with herd immunity and with as many people as possible getting vaccinated. And I've heard statistics where up to 30% of the American adult population is refusing to get vaccinated.
Okay. And what about the task force, the vice president, Dr. Birx, even Dr. Fauci, who somehow has come out the other ends unscathed. I don't think he should be unscathed. He was part of that task force that
Well,
led us
but
down.
I think you had an administration that didn't want to listen to science and that was unwilling to do. I'll go back to a year ago when I was accusing, well, not a year ago, because we didn't have the levels of death that we had. But there came a time last year when I believed that it was possible to find President Trump guilty of manslaughter because he was not doing what was necessary based on what we knew from science that needed to be done to save American lives. Now, murder not, because it can't be, and you and I are lawyers, Sheila, so we know the legal criteria for murder, but certainly could be found guilty of manslaughter based on what he knew, what science and medicine told him, and what he refused to do for the safety of Americans. He killed Americans.
Right, but certainly that's true. But Karen, I want to have you weigh in on this. Yes, if Trump is guilty, so are Vice President Pence, Dr. Fauci, Dr. Birx, the CDC director, the FDA director. Those people are complicit. They did not have the courage to speak up as scientists and lead us in the right direction. And I'm angry about that. Karen, should there be a huge investigation, and should there be some accountability for what that task force did or didn't do that led to more deaths than were necessary in this country?
Well, I think we've talked about this. I slightly disagree with you because I think that what happened, again, was the brainwashing, that they took words out of context, that they took Fauci's words out of context. I didn't watch the full Birx interview. It made me just ill. But, because I didn't want to feel bad for her. But I do think that with Fauci, they constantly took him out of context. The mask thing, everything was, he also, I think we have to respect the fact that there were things we didn't know when we didn't know them. So if you look back when you knew them, so at that point, as of March 1st, whenever that was, that we really knew, and then the doctors were saying, no, we need to shut down. No, we need to stay shut down. That wasn't accepted. And Trump kept spinning their words and saying different things. So, I think that Trump, I have to say, I don't know what they could have done. I think the tension is, if they had quit, who would they put in their place? That jerk that they put in later when they pushed them out? Behind the scenes, I suspect the vaccine went so fast because of Fauci, wasn't that under him? I suspect that, but Birx, I thought, did bold-faced lies. I think Fauci got taken out of context. I don't know what he could have done. I'm not there, but I think that I don't like when we keep spreading out the guilt. The guilt here is on one man, and that is Trump. And the way he dilutes this, I want to say this is his conceit. His conceit is to continually dilute it, to say things back and forth, so you don't know which is the thing he said. And then he blames, and people pick that up. And this is how I think this man gets out of everything. I believe those guys probably couldn't have done anything. I don't know if they'd quit, what it would have done. No one was listening to them. It was a Republican House and Senate. And Trump had his spin doctors, and it comes from the top. And the more we try to blame other people, the more off the hook that man gets. He is negligent. He knew, he should have known, he knew or should have known. He failed to act. He knew what there was, and there was damage. I think he is negligent in so many ways. The caravan, the deaths.
No, I disagree. I disagree completely. People under Trump are complicit. They have a responsibility to the American people. It is Trump's fault. He's the leader, but people under him have to have courage, and they had no courage.
Hold on. I totally disagree, and I agree with Karen. So let's have some controversy here, because It livens
Okay.
things up.
Very
The
good.
bottom line is you've got to go back and I can't remember who said it. I apologize. Whatever president says, the buck stops with me. The buck stops here. As a leader, that is your sole responsibility. He had the responsibility of the American public, and he can't deflect it. It was on him.
I'm not asking Tim to any
But you're
deflection.
asking for other people to
I
be held
didn't ask-
responsible, and that's okay. Except I agree with Karen. We need an investigation. I don't believe that Fauci was listened to. And I also agree with Karen. But for Fauci, we may have ended up with even something more terrible, and certainly not with the vaccination getting pushed through the way that it did.
I don't want to get too far afield, but I am going to use the Nuremberg trials as an example that you cannot get away with it by saying, well, I was following Trump, or he was my leader, or I was under his control, or he's the most
But
one
that's
at
not what they're
fault, or
saying.
That's
They
not
are
what they're
saying,
sorry.
That's not what they're
but no,
saying.
Fauci is saying, I talk science. I talked medicine.
Well, he
I
didn't
talked the
talk
truth.
science. He did not. When
Yes, he
Trump
did.
was saying
Yes,
his
he
stuff,
did.
he and Burke
Yes, he
did not
did.
say that Trump is wrong. They did not. They should have used their power as scientists to say to the world, this man is causing death by not following the science. We cannot stay in this administration. We'll have a parallel scientific community letting the world know what the correct way to proceed is.
No.
They had
Sheila,
no courage.
what power does
and
that
they-
have? Well, what power does that have? What do they get done if they leave the
You
administration?
don't stay under a
What do they
leader
get done?
who is lying and causing death. You don't stay under him and keep quiet and say, well, I'm doing the best I can to change him in different ways. You don't do that. That's not courage.
But
That's
hold on.
not courage.
But hold on
Sheila.
one sec.
Fauci
Who would
All
testified.
right,
listen to
we're
them?
gonna leave this
Who would
topic.
listen
We
to
haven't.
them?
We're gonna
No,
leave
no, no,
this
no, no, no.
topic.
I just have to
because
say one more
we
thing.
disagree.
If
We
they
disagree.
didn't
We're
have
gonna-
the backup of the administration, who would listen to them? Who would listen to? Who would?
The
who
world
put
would
them on
listen
the
to them.
news?
I would
Who
listen
would-
to them. You would listen to them. There would be pressure of
They wouldn't be
people around the
published.
world.
They wouldn't be
They
on
would
the
win-
news. They wouldn't be on
They
TV.
will win awards
Nobody
for
would listen
courage.
to-
Yes, they would listen to
Nope.
them. All right, let's move on. Let's
Nope.
move on.
Nope.
You can't
Nope.
get away with it by saying I was just under the leader and he's at fault. You can't
They
do
didn't
that.
do anything wrong.
Next, here it is. This is the next issue. Not that we don't have enough with the pandemic, with the racial issues that are dividing our country. The Chauvin trial is going on right now as we speak in Minneapolis. But here we go. People are being vaccinated. Students are going back to work, and 2 mass shootings in a week. Wow, America is getting back to normal. Greg, comment.
It was more than 2 mass shootings. And all of them, it's interesting. I don't want to get deflected into the details of the incidents and just say that the one thing that ties them together is we are the most heavily armed society in the world, and easy access to weapons that are designed for nothing but killing people in mass numbers as quickly as possible is an issue that we've had to deal with. And one of the things here is what's interesting is the bipartisan nature of resistance to effective gun laws. Resistance to laws that are, or at least proposals that are wildly popular with both Democrats and conservatives about common sense things like background checks, like waiting periods, things like that. And yet, even though they're wildly popular, they can't get past anything. And Sheila, you actually passed along an article last week about the origins of this misguided belief that the right to have as many AR-15s as you want is somehow enshrined in the Constitution, when essentially that's the product of 50 years of lobbying rather than anything that the framers originally intended. this is a consequence of it. You're going to have unbalanced people. You're going to have people, well, let's put this more frankly. You're going to have unbalanced men. You're going to have unbalanced men who are very angry, who basically regard the world as a problem and want to hit back. And whether that is the basis of a lot of the Republican appeal to culture war issues, or the basis of damaged people pulling out a semi-automatic weapon and wandering into a grocery store, that's the problem. We have that basis of anger, but only in the United States is that basis of anger allowed access to large-scale weaponry.
Right. You know, the other interesting thing is through that article and my readings, it's not just that the right or the NRA, the gun people, need guns to protect against intruders and criminals coming to their homes and businesses. They need guns to protect against the government coming after them, to protect against Barack Obama coming to take their guns. It's become a posse comitatus, or whatever, those self-militia groups. That's what's so surprising about what guns are needed for in America, according to the right. Shannon.
Can I say one other thing?
Yeah, go ahead. Yes.
One other thing that was not really mentioned in the article you circulated is that there is a growing sentiment or a growing body of scholarship that says the origins of the Second Amendment were in fugitive slave militias in the South. That essentially the Second Amendment came about because fugitive slave militias wanted to be organized and armed when they chased after enslaved people who had run away from their enslavement in the South, and that was that there was a large support for the Second Amendment from that institution.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. Also, we know that when the decision came down in Heller in the 90s with Justice Scalia claiming that the Second Amendment really meant people could have guns in their own homes, it wasn't just a militia thing. That up until then, most, Shannon, you can speak to this, most constitutional scholars thought that the Second Amendment did not refer to personal ownership of guns, right?
Nope.
Right.
It did not.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not a constitutional scholar, and I don't pretend to be one, even on television. But the bottom line is the Second Amendment has been so stretched that if you really go back and read its intent and how it came about, the framers, the founders, whoever you want to listen to about when the Second Amendment was promulgated, would not even recognize its application right now. The two things I want to say are I have two different dichotomies about gun rights. One is that I have been told, and I haven't investigated it, that we have more than enough, and I know we don't, because there are two things that we don't have, which is universal background checks and the prohibition of AR-15s and whatnot, but that we have many pieces of already passed legislation on the books in our laws that, if they were properly applied, would provide significantly more protection than I now feel with regard to dealing with gun rights in our society. But I don't believe that actually is the case, because we do need federal legislation to provide greater protection from gun advocates, I think is the best way to look at it, who believe that their rights are constitutional, God-given, whatever you want to say about that. Having worked as a congressional staffer, I will tell you the most powerful lobby, bar none, in the 80s while I worked there was the NRA. Incredible power among Democrats and Republicans. So it is a bipartisan issue that has bipartisan, if you want to talk about what you were talking about before, Sheila, when we disagreed, bipartisan responsibility. The Democrats have to use the majority right now, and if they truly want to stick up for what I believe their constituents believe in, they need to enact more federal legislation to restrict gun rights.
Right. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next slide. And Karen, take a look at this. Now is not the time now. Isn't that what the Republicans always say? Oh, we need time to mourn and grieve, and then we'll worry about legislation. There's that one. And now follow up with this one, which I think is a sad commentary. How long before America just accepts thousands of senseless deaths as the norm? And the guy with the rifles and the NRA shirt says, sooner than you think. Karen, do you just think we feel it's almost a lost cause?
I mean, I think that we've certainly accepted it and become more inured to it. But what I was right, I was trying to take notes while you guys were talking. I mean, I think if my memory serves, we're the only civilized country that has not responded to its first or second incidents of mass shootings and violence by severely and critically restricting guns. I don't remember the whole thing, but in England, there was a mass shooting of was it England? A bunch of kids, like 50 kids or somewhere. I can't remember. That was it for guns. They're gone. In Australia or New Zealand, I think we are the only civilized society that allows this to continue. I think, I don't know how bipartisan it is, but I mean, I know that it is because here we are. But I also think, I'm going to go back to what I said earlier, and the Republican sound bites. They're simple, they're hyperbolic, and they brainwash people into believing that this is one more way that the government wants to take away from you, those socialists who don't want you to have money, don't want you to have freedom. So even if people don't want a gun in their house, they're being brainwashed to believe this is just one more thing that is what the government wants to do because you have a right. I don't know why that particular Republicans or that particular bent of thought is so good at simple, hyperbolic, repetitive, making it people believe this is part of the larger issue. People don't read. I don't expect everyone to read Scalia's whole commentary on where the commas were and what the real, that business. But people don't read. So, or they don't even have to know the history of it. But if you actually read Heller, it says this does not limit the government or states from restricting guns for public safety or public health or whatever term he
regulations,
used. Yeah. But we don't talk about that. Now, Kamala Harris did say it the other day, which I thought was the first time. But we need to be simple, hyperbolic, and repetitive. Simple, hyperbolic, repetitive. And otherwise, I think that people who may even be Democrats who don't read, who don't like to look any further than what they hear sound bites and think, oh shit, that's taking away from me and my right. And that goes back to our narcissistic country. But I do think that it's appalling. I think obviously we have accepted it, whether I personally have, it nauseates me. But do I sit in front of the TV now and watch every single, at some point, no. You know what I mean? Like when Newtown happened, then when Parkland happened, then, this latest, they haven't really talked that much about who the people were. I mean, they did a little bit, but we're stopping that. And so I think we've accepted it because we're not fighting it. And I think the filibuster needs to go. I think there's risks because what happens when, we get out of, well, we change it right before we leave office. I don't know. But
we'll get
to not change it now is to be complicit. This is it. I mean, otherwise we've accepted it. If we
let me just
I'm pissed. How's that?
Let me just say that the public in all of the polls shows that the so-called background checks are very popular. Banning assault weapons, I think, also gets a majority of the popular vote. We will talk about the filibuster because it seems that the Republicans are standing in the way of getting a lot of things passed that have been proven by polls to be popular with the American people. But this is my thought that I would like you to comment on, Greg, before we leave this subject. Okay, so we get some passage of some background checks. And maybe we even get the AR-15, some assault weapons banned. And yes, Heller did say that you could have regulation. No right is absolute. we haven't had a lot of test cases in the Supreme Court yet as to regulations coming up to see if they meet they meet that standard. But this is my thought. We've got over 300 million, 400 million guns in this country, more than every single person. My fear is no matter what we do around the edges with these background checks and even some bans on some weapons, that unless we get rid of the plethora of guns in this country, we will not ever rid ourselves of this problem in American culture. Your comment, Greg.
I think two things. One is the best we can do is what we can do from now on. Basically, if we make some parts of the gun culture in the United States a little more difficult, we can see what happens. The one thing that people haven't been mentioning, and this was something I was actually reading something on yesterday, is the other thing is the gun show loophole. That essentially people are allowed to possess any number of guns, and as long they don't have to register as a gun seller unless they have like a fixed location. And so the transfer of this was actually written by an African-American columnist. He went to a gun show and he felt really out of place because of all the Confederate flags and Trump paraphernalia that was on sale. But when it came time for him to buy a gun, he just walked up and put down the money. And the person who sold him the gun didn't have to have a license, didn't have to have any real tracking of the transaction, because we've created this massive loophole in the selling of guns that allows them to move back and forth. And you're right, Sheila, we have 300 to 400 billion guns in this country, and getting rid of them will be, or not getting rid of them, but at least bringing them under some form of control will be a marathon effort. And we have not shown as a country a good appetite for anything that is longer than about a month.
Right. And the last guy in, was it in Colorado? He bought the gun very recently before the shooting, and he passed the check. Right. I think that's what I read.
Sheila, real quickly, when all of you were talking, the thing that came to my mind is, I don't know that we can really deal with our gun society until we get at why do people desire guns? And I mean, I think until you get at the root cause of the problem, which is number one, getting at why do people think they have a right? They truly believe it's a constitutional right to own a gun. And until we get it at why people desire guns, and really, and again, getting back to Karen's point that people don't read, but anybody who reads knows that you are incredibly more unsafe, as far as I know, by owning a gun than you are safe by owning a gun, because you're way more likely to get killed with your own firearm.
Well,
in any event, I think when everybody's talking, the thing that really just came to mind is just getting at the root cause. So why do we desire guns? And does it really make people feel more safe? And is it really true that they are more safe? And I think until we get rid of, their desire for guns, that this issue is not going to go away. Legislation upon legislation upon legislation.
Right. Well, the gun culture is so embedded in our American culture. Whether it's the pioneer culture, the quote Wild West culture. Your questions are good. We need extensive study, but chalk me up as a pessimist. Maybe we'll talk about the filibuster in a minute. Maybe we'll get some legislation through, but I worry about it being so little around the edges to really, really make a difference. So let's move on. I don't think we're going to solve it, but obviously it's a huge cultural, political, human issue in America that we
Sheila, can I say one more thing?
What?
Just to what both of you said. First, I think people are brainwashed into believing, there's a certain gun culture, and then there's the rest of the people who are brainwashed into thinking it's a right, and the government's going to take it away from you. Therefore, I'm going to fight against it. So getting to the root of it, I think that's the root. There's the people who are really into it. And then there's everybody else who thinks, oh, you're a socialist. You're taking away from me.
Okay. All right. Got it.
That's one. Two, even when you were talking, Greg, I started to glaze. Not because you were talking, you're very smart, but because I can't listen to the loopholes and the gun shows and the whatever. We as Democrats are too smart and we make it too complicated. We need sound bites. We need sound bites. We need hyperbole, and we need just to do it. And you know what I mean? Not break it apart, not keep going down this, well, we should do this, we should do that, we should do this. But just like the sound bite is, it needs to get done. That's what I think.
All right. So again, the final cartoon in this issue is, of course, there you have the Cruz and that Boebert. She's that nutty, I don't know, congresswoman, the QAnon, whatever the heck she is. Trump with the NRA thing. Yeah. Minds and hearts are with the gun. So that's another issue, the gun industry, the power of the NRA. And again, we will revisit, I am sure we will revisit this issue again and again. All right, let's see. Oh, and again, the most famous insurrection. How do you like that? All the people that Senator Johnson loves from his states, they just really wanted to have some fun and be nice, and they would never break the law. Talking about the insurrection. Greg, this one will give you, so here we are, the insurrection, Trump. What do we make of it? Is he going to finally be held to account? We've got this cartoon, which is great. Am I getting it from prosecution? This cartoon, the New York Times, and we're uncovering tax fraud and all kinds of things that might finally get him. What else? I like this one. Don't worry, Donald. I won't let you slip into irrelevancy. And there she is, right? Justice saying, we're going to get you. We're going to get you. What do you say, Greg? Are we going to get him?
I get more worried about it as we go on. And there hasn't been a lot of seeming progress or anything. I mean, given the amount of paper that the attorneys have been buried in, I try to maintain a certain level of optimism in the face of that. But first, I think there's no way we're going to get him for anything that he did federally. I just don't think it'll happen. I think it's going to have to be a state prosecution. And I think, the New York one, I don't think the Georgia election interference one is that's gonna be a hard sell. In history, what has often brought down right-wing dictators is not what they did in office or who they killed. It is they enriched themselves. They used things to enrich themselves. There's this strange dichotomy of conservatives accepting murder of your political enemies, expulsion of your political enemies, imprisonment of your political enemies, but they don't accept it if you made money doing it. And that's the thing that's going to get Trump. It's going to be that tax fraud, that insurance fraud, that bank fraud, and the idea that the Trump organization is essentially a racketeering organization. Right.
Well, let's hope. Let's hope. And again, the next really important issue, if at first you don't succeed, so, we tried with an insurrection. We tried to stop the Electoral College from taking that final vote that would confirm that Biden won. And, we couldn't get that done. So now, here we go. We're going to crack on, have an insurrection against our democracy by making sure we have voter suppression. I mean, we're going to become like the British with their interviews of Meghan Markle and how talking about some racial incidents with her kid. Are we going to become like that? And here we go. Jim Crow suppression, Georgia, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. Shannon, speak to that issue, voter suppression, and what we need to do about it.
It's a very scary thing, Sheila. And we touched on a little bit, I think, last November when we talked about, or I recall talking about our concern that if the presidency was left up to the state governments, that the majority of them, I believe, are Republican, and that was a tremendous concern. And so here we are. When we leave it to state government, and that's why it's so important to get involved locally and on your state level, because Stacey Abrams has called this Jim Crow 2.0, what the governor just signed in Georgia. So Republicans are brilliant. Sometimes if they can't get it done on a national level, which they can't for the next 2 years, they're going to go back to their roots and go state by state by state. The fact that you can't even deliver water or food to somebody standing in line to vote, just incredible. Absolutely incredible. So it is Jim Crow 2.0. I did study voting rights at law school with a brilliant Lonnie Guinier, who worked for the NAACP and then for the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice. We need to take care of it on a local level. We just went through the census. We've got to prevent gerrymandering from occurring, which is another issue that I know we can't get at, but there is a tremendous amount that gets done on the state and local level that we have to address. We can't just always focus federally, because if we miss the ball locally, voter suppression happens.
Right. Okay. Let's see. And now, with the voter suppression, here we go. Think of all the things that President Biden wants to do beside the rescue plan. There's voting rights acts. There's the John Lewis Act. There's infrastructure. There's racial equality and justice acts. There's the minimum wage again. And there's climate change legislation. Every issue that Democrats have been dreaming of, yes, gun rights issues, everything that we've been dreaming about to transform our culture and our politics are stuck. Right now, we're at an inflection point where Biden is getting stuff done, but he passed that big bill without any Republican votes and by using reconciliation. Now, we're not going to get in the weeds as to the Senate rules, but in order to stop debate and take a vote now on an issue, you need to get 60 votes, and the Democrats only have 50 and 51 with the vice president. So, Karen, give us a little thought about the filibuster and look at how it's tying everything up. Are we going to break it? Give us your prediction.
Well, as Joe Manchin. Well, that's that was wrong. I think that
Freudian, very Freudian.
We don't have the votes to get rid of the filibuster. So they don't even have the votes to get rid of the filibuster. And so I just hope we shame the people who are holding out, because it can't go away without those few votes.
All right, you just said that, so here you go. Name the co-equal branches of government: executive, judicial, and Joe Manchin. So, Karen, yeah, he's that senator from West Virginia who says, I love the filibuster. I love bipartisanship. I'm not doing anything unless we get Republicans aboard. I'm going to ask you a prediction. I predict that President Biden will be able to convince Joe Manchin to leave that behind and to work on getting rid of the filibuster, so a lot of things we want passed can pass. What do you think?
I agree. I agree with you. I think he will. I think this is so important. I think we don't always know what's happening behind the scenes, and I actually like that sometimes, because I do trust what he's doing, and I trust he has the right people to do it. And so I don't feel anxious. I know that he will work this out. I think he will get to Joe Manchin eventually. Maybe not tomorrow, the next day, but he will do it. And so I think that this will be done. But
all right, just going to get a quick prediction from Shannon and from Greg. Shannon, will they in some fashion, do away with the filibuster in such a way that they can pass other legislation? Yes or no?
They're not going to do away with the filibuster. They're going to change it so that legislation could be passed. And I know you want to yes or no, but I just got to do a little bit of knowledge here. It has been used more in the last 4 years than in the prior decade since it was created. It has been abused and is going to continue to be abused until we deal with it for its original purpose and use it appropriately.
Okay. Greg, what's your prediction on this?
I think we're going to see it changed in some way. It will not be eliminated. I personally either like the idea of a talking filibuster where you actually have to hold the floor and debate and defend, and also the idea that you have to defend on the merits, not read from Green Eggs and Ham, as Ted Cruz did, or was it Rand Paul? But the other idea that I really like was one that was floated, I think it might have been floated by Chris Murphy, was the idea that instead of having 60 votes to cease debate, you have to have 40 votes to continue debate. That, I think, would be a much more substantive change.
Okay, that's great. Let's see what happens in the next few weeks, because I read that Chuck Schumer, the majority leader, has all kinds of procedural things up his sleeves, and I know they're working on it, because I know that Biden is determined to get a lot of stuff done.
There's always executive order.
All right, now we're running a little bit on time, so I want this to be like a lightning round. I know you're all knowledgeable and can go on and on about every subject. It's fantastic, but we've got to start to bring our show to a close. So I'm going to have a kind of a lightning round, and I'll show each one and just give a little couple of sentences, if you can do it, to crystallize your views on this. The border crisis. Greg, comment on this slide.
Republican framing.
Okay.
It's not a crisis, it's cyclical.
Okay, there you go. Shannon.
Well, my understanding is that, thank goodness, we just opened Fort Bliss to open 5,000 beds. And yeah, it may be what Joe Biden Child Development Center for a while, but it is finally going to be dealt with in the proper way.
All right. Do you think, Shannon, that the Democrats can win the word war, the framing war, the propaganda war against the Republicans on this issue?
Yes, like Gregory said, it's a framing issue. Bottom line, I just learned this from January to March every year, while it is weather-wise feasible to go across the deserts. We see this every year. Trump had 30%. We have 27%. It's cyclical.
Okay. Karen, a concise comment on this one.
I don't know, because I haven't read enough, and having not really read enough right now about this, I can see how the Republican sound bites might get you. Because it's simple, it's easy. Look at, you know what I mean? It's not getting me, but I can't comment because I need to dig in a little deeper on what's happening.
All right. Well, I know that Biden has on his agenda to pass a bill that includes a path to citizenship for undocumented people, and also finally to do something permanent for the Dreamers, so that they're no longer under executive order. They're actually in real legislation. But yes, the Republicans frame it as amnesty when you give people the path to citizenship, and we have to work on framing it the right way. And again, the surge, as Greg mentioned and as Shannon mentioned, this is a cyclical thing that happens all the time. It's not related to who might be in the White House. It's related to what's going on in Central and South America.
Well, and Biden had a really good point in his press conference, Sheila, really quickly. If we do not deal with the problems that caused the surge in the Central American countries, which he tried to do while he was part of the Obama administration, it's never going to be solved.
Right. And again, talking about the framing, this thing, the caravan of Republicans trying to say the subject, they want to put the border front and center because they think they have the right framing on that, and not talk about the shots in arms and money in pockets that Biden is providing. Okay, Greg, again, who knew I had such a green thumb? Hate crimes. And this one, oh, like it's my fault. Yeah. What do you think?
Well, we've all been talking about it forever. It's that that Trump sort of brought to the forefront saying the quiet parts out loud. And when you give that imprimatur to just virulent hate of whoever you define as the other, it is predictable that people are going to act on it, and people are going, it's going to get, even if you didn't intend it. And I don't think he actually really cared more than anything else. Basically we are spinning as a society, as an American society, in this stew of hate that he helped engender.
Right. Shannon.
I don't, yep, I'm here. I don't know what to say. Attack on any American is un-American. And there's just so many issues that we have to deal with to get at what I said a couple minutes ago. Unless we start to deal with the roots of the problems, they're unsolvable. So one problem at a time, and as many people as can be dealing with the roots of the problems. Just, I don't know what more to say, Sheila. I'm sorry to be speechless, but the anti-Asian. Well, the other thing the thing that I will say. Oh shucks, I'm going to lose it. It was stop anti-Asian hatred, and it was like, no, stop white supremacy. And I think that's where we need to get at. It's getting at our white privilege, getting at white supremacy, getting at the hatred, getting at the divisiveness, all of that.
Right. Well, I think this cartoon sadly documents the fact that in our country, we do have a good proportion of Americans who are white supremacists, bigots, anti-Asian, and
well, when you call it the China flu for a year, it doesn't help.
Well, it's not just that. He brought to the fore currents that were there already and
Absolutely.
gave them permission to come out. But our country is fraught with that. And we talk about the 1619 Project and how we've never gotten over, and that's another subject we'll take on next time, gotten over racism in America and all of the legacy of slavery in this country. And we've got the Chauvin trial going on right now as we speak in Minneapolis to document that. So we've got a lot of work to do. Karen, just quickly, the massage parlor.
I mean, I'm stuck on the other. There is the white men are threatened. Sorry, not all white men, but it is the white men who are threatened and think that the other, which are women, any other race, women, anything that isn't a white man is a threat to their very lifestyle and well-being. Because look at who in Congress, other than the QAnon lady, are really touting all of this stuff. And who are these white supremacists? Well, they're primarily white men. Number two, my father, because we don't send the right message. My father was an immigrant. He wasn't born in this country. He was born in Egypt, Alexandria, Egypt, fleeing the Turks. My son just did a thing. I'm going to say this quickly. And he came to this, so they fled, they took a boat here, came to this country. My father was a physicist. He worked on the Manhattan Project, helped make the atom bomb, was actually a Republican. Or he was a brilliant scientist, worked on that project. He was an immigrant. He came from Alexandria, Egypt, from a shithole country. He was fleeing persecution because of his religion. Well, at 8 months old, whatever. And so why aren't we somehow, our sound bites are not we talk about what immigrants do for us. that's when they clean the floor and sweep. You know, that's the thing that we seem to talk about all the time. Like Trump, you know what I mean? Like, oh, we need them for our economy. Yes, but not to shit on. Because look at where we are and how short-sighted and how non-historical are you to not look at history and how racist, how, you know, everyone has been discriminated against. So let's
Look,
stop.
America was the shining beacon. A lot of people still feel it is, but this particular cartoon about anti-Semitism, whether we're talking about anti-Asia, anti-Black, white supremacy, we still have those cancers in our society. And
Well,
I guess the
Sheila,
only good thing is that we are able to talk about it and bring it out in the open and
we
try
are.
to
And
do
let me
something about it.
sorry to overtalk you. The real quickly, I want to just touch on what Karen said. Why it is, it's not just Trump. Why it is coming to the fore right now is because white men are no longer the majority in American society, and they are incredibly threatened by that.
And they're in
So it is coming from a place of fear. And when they are no longer the majority, they've been the minority for a while, but Trump gave them permission to speak in a way they never had been able to before. And I think that's why we're seeing it. They're threatened, they're scared.
All right. Well, that's an interesting comment. And of course, I harken back to the women's movement that started in the 60s and 70s that we were a part of, I was a part of. And one of the failings of it is that we raised the consciousness of women, but we never brought all of the men along with us. We brought some of them along, Gregory and Bruce Loudon, I'll mention, my husband and others, right? But I think we did not bring them all along, and we're still a little kind of stuck in that. All right. We got to keep going. I know we could talk forever. I'm sure it's terrific. Anything to say? Just give me one word. Is Cuomo going to resign or stick it out? The only one word. Karen?
Stick it out.
Greg?
Impeachment.
Will he be impeached? He'll be impeached. Will he lose and be convicted?
You said only one word, and I chose it carefully.
Well,
I don't know. I mean, I think the only way he leaves is if he's impeached.
Okay, and
I'm with Greg. I don't think he's going to resign.
Shannon?
One word is agree. And that was agree with Karen, agree with Gregory.
Okay.
He will not resign. He will be impeached.
All right. And again, this is just another play on that Cuomo business. It's a line for governor's accusers. All right. And I'm going to end here because it's Women's History Month. And the Equal Rights Amendment, strangely, interestingly, has a chance to be passed by states that failed to ratify it if a piece of legislation goes through that extends time for it to be ratified. Shannon, are you up on that? And what do you think?
Yes, I'm not up on that, but I am aware of it. I'm not as up on it to talk eloquently about it. But I studied extensively the 100th anniversary of the passage of the 19th Amendment last year. That is what women's groups are continuing to tout this year because we didn't get to celebrate it last year with the pandemic. And I do believe that will pass. I do believe that women are the majority and we're the majority voters, and that we will get in our states, the states that haven't yet ratified it, an extension, and it will be passed. Wouldn't that be glorious?
All right. On that optimistic note, we're going to take off the where am I? Take off our slideshow. And did you have fun with that? I think those political cartoons are a good way to frame some of the issues, aren't they?
Excellent.
Excellent.
Yeah, I'm gonna do that again. So finally, as we say goodbye, your final thoughts briefly. Is there anything that's going on that we didn't cover that we need to look at and talk about maybe next time? Shannon?
Oh, come to me first. Make my brother grow. Go ahead,
All
Gregory.
right.
Gregory's thought about this more.
Okay, Gregory, you go first. Just, final thoughts about the panoply of issues we talked about, or if there's something else that we need to consider.
Infrastructure.
Okay.
The shutdown of the Suez Canal, demonstrating our vulnerability to things moving. That's an infrastructure problem, and I'm hoping that this is one of the things that Biden has counted on as a bill that will have a lot of bipartisan support, is a huge thing addressing the fact that we've been spending down our social capital and not investing in this country from the Reagan era forward because of the obsession with tax cuts for rich people.
Okay. I agree with you. Infrastructure is important. My optimistic prediction is that there will be a huge, fantastic infrastructure bill that will create millions of jobs, and not one Republican will vote for it. Shannon?
I agree with that statement. And thank you for a little bit of extra time to come to my two issues that we didn't touch on. Climate change is huge. We need to talk about it. The Suez Canal, I think, was part of that. Thank God for the worm moon and the high tides that the worm moon created. All right, wonderful. And the other thing that is near and dear to my heart as the chair of the Board of Education for 5.5 years is education. We got to start talking about universal pre-K, what we're going to do about relief from student debt that is totally hampering our graduates from moving on in their lives, and whether or not we're going to make free community college, at least in the United States, a thing of the future.
Okay, great. Karen?
I can't top those two. I'm all set.
All right.
So just agree with me, Karen. Woo!
Listen, we've been in agreement all day, Shannon.
All right.
Okay.
I think we've covered most of the hot button issues. We'll check it again in a few months and see how things are going. In the meantime, it's been a pleasure for Greg in California, Karen in Boston, Shannon in Connecticut. The beauty of StreamYard bringing us together. And we'll see you next time on Talkback. Bye.
Thank you, Sheila.
Thanks, Sheila.
Bye, guys.
Okay.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.